Good afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your host. Throughout these episodes, we've viewed a lot of different facets of safety culture, what it takes to get a good one, a positive one, and some of the challenges that in fact can get in the way of where you really want to be. If you see some of the posts I have on LinkedIn, thank you. I appreciate all the comments back and some of the people following what we're doing. It's kind of like changing the direction of a giant cruise ship, right? You got to have steady pressure on that rudder, and incrementally you'll start seeing change. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to have with us on the show is Dr. Gary Allread. He is a program director for SRI-Ergonomics Incorporated, the consulting and training branch of the Ohio State University Spine Research Institute. His work involves translating ergonomics and workplace biomechanics research into usable knowledge for the industries. He manages and provides ergonomic technical assistance to industrial clients with a focus on preventing musculoskeletal disorders in a wide variety of occupational work settings, including manufacturing, distribution, and food processing. Dr. Allread has authored peer-reviewed research articles on various ergonomics topics, including risk behaviors from lifting materials and handling, interventions to reduce low back injuries, and the influence of one's personality on musculoskeletal disorder development. Gary received his PhD from the Ohio State University in 2000 and is also a certified professional ergonomist. He serves on the board of the Applied Ergonomics Society, actively collaborates with the annual Applied Ergonomics Conference, and has been a member of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society since 1987. Dr. Allread, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for taking time to join us.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's an honor to be on your show.
And we talked earlier, and last time we chatted, folks, I'm having so much fun with Dr. Allread because I know enough about ergonomics to get me in trouble. And like I shared with Gary, I assume it's okay to call you Gary's versus Doctor. Okay, perfect.
I'm just going to ask you to do that.
Done. And so I told him it took me about a year to figure out how to say ergonomist. So I'm kind of past that leap, you know. So and you've been at this for a while, so it's probably fair to say the last 10 to 15 years, you're seeing more recognition of the value of having a comprehensive ergonomics program for a lot of companies. Is that a fairly accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is something I think is becoming even more important these days, given the prevalence and the cost of injuries that are occurring to employees who are sustaining cumulative trauma injuries, musculoskeletal disorders, and those tend to be the highest costs and most debilitating across many different.
Did we lose him? Let's see. There he is. Yep. Yeah, we're still there. So sometimes electronic wiring will have a wrinkle in it somewhere. But I think, is it part of the challenge for the uninitiated, if you will, about ergo in general, that some of these are more of those soft tissue injuries, so it's not near as visible, or probably the resulting injury is not near as immediate because it can have the potential to be more of a cumulative disorder for somebody, or with a soft tissue injury. Is that kind of on target?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think in terms of understanding the safety culture, one has to also understand that the injury process for cumulative trauma injuries, soft tissue injuries, strains and sprains, back disorders, carpal tunnel syndrome, that's a lot different than a safety related injury. That's more of an acute injury in nature.
Right.
And even though I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of how you injure that are comparable, I think, with an ergonomics culture, if you will.
Right.
One really needs to understand the differences in that injury process, because it's going to really dictate how you respond to someone who is claiming that they're having this type of injury, because it's not so obvious.
Very good point. One thing I want to follow up, we briefly touched on it in your bio, is the potential for an individual's personality in the workplace to impact positively or negatively the success of an ergo initiative?
I think that what we're seeing in the discipline of ergonomics is a much better appreciation of the various components of an entire work system that can relate either positively or negatively to the occurrence of an injury. And so many of us in the safety and ergonomics field focus on the physical aspects of work. How heavy are things? How repetitively are you lifting things? Are you coming in contact with dangers that can cause an acute injury? But what you're dealing with here with the safety culture is dealing with this whole picture in terms of the environment in which that work is taking place and how people respond to one another. But another component of that is the person who is doing that work, the employees, and they come with their own set of characteristics that can mediate that relationship between work and themselves and the likelihood that they get hurt or not. And so some of the research that I've done in the past has shown that when individuals' personalities and their preferred method of doing work is different from what's required, perhaps, in work, likelihood of them reporting some type of soft tissue strain and sprain is increased.
Well, it's interesting you mention that, because now I know with some of the companies I've worked with, they'd look at the standing desk that you could raise up and down so you don't sit all the time. And some people, and it's just kind of scary. Of course, you did a paper on this as part of your dissertation, I think, is that a lot of the people, when they kind of poo-pooed it, it didn't work near as well for them because they kind of convinced themselves it wasn't going to work anyway. So I don't think they really applied a conscious effort to learn a better practice.
I agree with that. I also think that, how something like that, sit-stand desk, for example, has been rolled in to the environment, how that was introduced, how it was instructed on use, can go a long way at determining whether or not someone's going to accept that or not. If we look at the objective research on sit-stand desks, it makes sense from a biomechanical perspective in that it provides some relief to the body, changing your posture and providing some rest and that type of thing. But it also is important to understand the context in which that is being used. And that often dictates whether or not people accept use of that and actually take advantage of it or not.
It's a kind of a nice little segue. I'm referring to a paper, 3 Ways to Make Sure Your Ergonomic Projects Stay on Track. A quote about the third paragraph. I got to read this verbatim. Fewer than half of major corporate reengineering projects implemented with Fortune 1000 companies were successful, less than 50%. That's kind of stunning, because if you're a Fortune 1000 company, you kind of got a little game going on, don't you, Gary? So it's not some little fly-by-night company, a few people. These are very robust organizations. I'm stunned that less than 50% are successful.
Yeah, and that's not just ergo-related initiatives. That's
right.
Safety initiatives in general. And even though there are likely a lot of benefits to large companies, but there's also likely been quite a history, a corporate history, a corporate culture, if you will, that has developed. And so I think that plays a large role at the success percentage of those initiatives that do roll out. Just because these companies are large doesn't mean that they're always run in a way that's beneficial in terms of implementation of safety practices.
And then likewise, in that same paper, I think you talk about for companies that do have more of that cohesive, positive safety culture, they can see some of these turnarounds occur 30 to 50% faster or quicker, or that organizations that really don't have that relationship with the people at the task level.
Right. And I think you hit on the exact point there, Mike, is that what is that relationship with the individuals who are affected by this? What kind of trust do they have in their leadership? And the impact of what this change is meant to entail, and what does it mean for them. I know when it comes to ergonomic initiatives, we can do analyses and determine how much less stress that's going to be on the body, but putting that into practice and making sure that it's effective, employees have to feel that it's beneficial to them, that it's desirable, that they feel like the new way of working or the new piece of equipment they might be using is useful and provides some benefit to them. And if they can check all those boxes, then there's a much better likelihood that safety or ergo-related intervention is going to be successful.
Excellent. Another topic I want to touch base with you on, and we've heard a lot about it, is the difference in approach on how you roll out ideas, how you people engage. If you're a baby boomer versus, I think it's the Z generation now, I think we refer to them. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because there is some distinct differences, I understand it, on how you want to be approaching those individuals.
There is. And so I think that the whole topic of generations and understanding those differences is really critical. And so I think anyone in a safety leadership role needs to understand that how you roll out a solution really, and the success of that really depends upon who is going to be affected by it. So, for example, if it's a very young workforce, individuals who are very adapt to technology, they like that type of change, then those type of changes are going to be accepted much more readily than what we'll probably see in more the traditionalists or the baby boom generation that might not be comfortable with technology or distrust technology and what it can do for them just because they don't have that life experience that younger generations do.
With that new technology. It's ironic you bring that up. This is pre-COVID, obviously. I was at a big workshop and I was sitting with a team, and so they gave us a problem to work on. You have 5 minutes, make some notes, and get ready to debrief. And so I'm working with younger fellow, probably in his 30s or 40s, and I'm taking the notes in my big legal pad, and I mentally watch. I'm so great. He's texting somebody on his iPhone versus doing our homework assignment. So we get done with our 5 minutes. He was putting all of his notes into the note feature of his iPad, and then he could talk to it, to his iPhone. So it's, I'm sitting there kind of doing longhand, and he's probably doing a better job than I am. So that's just, I think you're right. Their willingness to embrace technology. So with the baby boomers, what is a couple of thoughts on how to keep them engaged, to have a better work environment for them?
Well, without going into too much detail, certainly the baby boomers are, they respect authority, are very dedicated to their employer, and I think that those types of facts really have a big influence in how you would deal with them. Perhaps the approach is not to send an email to them about the change, but sit down and talk to them directly and explain that. That's going to be a method of communication that they're much more comfortable with. And so, that is one example of how you might want to approach, any safety culture changes or improvements based upon the people who are impacted.
Cool. We're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back, and you're learning a whole bunch more about ergonomics and how it can truly enhance just the quality of safety organization and productivity. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Safety Culture Strategies provides world-class safety culture and safety program management consultative services for clients throughout the United States. Whether your company is pursuing Voluntary Protection Program STAR designation, ISO 45001 certification, or considering a comprehensive review of your current safety programs and processes, Safety Culture Strategies brings hands-on experience combined with a unique perspective that readily translates from senior senior management to task-level personnel. This collective skill set provides you with a very insightful health check of your overall safety management system that can also assist with reducing injuries and attrition, as well as increasing profitability. Safety Culture Strategies is also certified to provide Ziegler Institute employee engagement training and leadership coaching. When combined with established relationships with federal and state regulators, Safety Culture Strategies is uniquely positioned to assist the safety culture efforts of any company. For additional information, visit www.scstrat.com or call us at 702-780-1410. After all, every company has a safety culture, but is it the culture you want?
And we're back. Thanks for hanging in with us. We have Dr. Gary Allread with us today. Lots of insight on ergonomics. And Gary, to kind of get a little more personal insight, who is one of the individuals that really influenced you, like a mentor early in your career that kind of changed the trajectory or enhanced the trajectory of where you're at now?
That's a good question. Probably the individual who had the most influence was an individual named Julian Christensen. He actually was one of the fathers of human factors in ergonomics. And in his career, he developed training for astronauts, including John Glenn and Neil Armstrong, as they prepared to go to the moon. And late in his career coincided with me very early in my career, right out of college. And one thing is, as world-renowned as he was and as intelligent as he was incredibly humble. And he never ceased to ask me my opinion about what I thought on things. And that has carried me through my entire career. And it certainly has benefited me, I think, in my role in dealing with employees who I'm trying to help in terms of improving their working life and reducing their injuries by listening to them, understanding and getting feedback from them in terms of what their ideas are for what might work or might not work in terms of making some improvements in their workplace. These people are the experts in what they do. Yes. And often I think we are short-sighted when we don't realize that and take that into account as we're trying to develop improvements that can help the safety and ergonomic culture of the environment.
It's interesting when you mentioned that being humble. Over my years, I worked a lot of Department of Energy National Laboratories doing some programmatic support on safety. Had the pleasure to spend time with Dr. Glenn Seaborg. They actually named an element after him, Seaborgium. And he was one of the most humble people I ever met in my life. I could sit down and have lunch with him, and he could explain to the old beat-up, white-haired safety guy how to bend the light in a way I could understand. Now, I couldn't tell anybody else after 10 minutes of the conversation, but it was just fascinating. He had that very much kind of down-to-earth approach, I guess is a good way to put it, that he was as far from aloof as possible, and to this day, it's still some of those conversations resonate with me. So I'm going back to that paper from last year of April, 3 ways to make sure your ergonomic projects stay on track, and it's a nice fit because I will talk to my guests. What's some traits of a positive safety culture? And in that paper, you touched on about 5 of them. Everything on the training to it and communicating, reinforcing it, and promoting the desired outcomes. So collectively, what if you had 1 or 2 key characteristics or traits that leaders of companies really need to focus on to enhance their safety culture? What do you think those might be?
That's another great question. I think that when we're talking about a safety culture, certainly my background is in ergonomics, but ergonomics is a huge part of safety. And so I think that when we think about how we're going to respond to a safety incident, is very different from how we're going to respond to an ergonomic incident. And we can't use that same mindset. We can't use that same methodology for solving an ergonomics issue that we can for a safety issue.
Really?
And
Okay. Can you give me some more? Now
well,
you really got me curious.
let me give you an example about
Okay.
what I mean by that, and how it relates to the safety culture. So, if there's a safety-related incident, accident, or a slip and fall or a cut or something, it's very clear what, in most cases, what caused that incident, and so
Okay.
we can directly eliminate that or prevent interaction between that hazard and the employee. When
Correct.
it comes to an ergonomics issue, or a concern in the workplace, it's not that we have to separate the employee from that exposure or that risk, but we have to minimize it to the extent that it doesn't cause long-term wear and tear on the body.
Very,
Do you see
very
the
good
difference
point.
there?
Very good
So,
point. Yes.
it's okay if people are bending to the floor. It's okay if they lift heavy things.
Right.
It's how much are they doing that? How often are they doing that? Because what we do in ergonomics is determine how much is too much.
Good
And
point.
so number one, we have to understand that employees can be exposed to these things that an outsider might say, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible," but it may not be if the rest of the environment is amenable
Good
to the
point.
health and safety of that individual.
And I think
And I
there's
think the other thing, go ahead, Mike.
I think there's some organization now that they offer a Fitbit or like an app for the Apple Watch that you can get a better sense of the biomechanics of motion while people are physically performing work as well. That can maybe provide some more additional insight and data.
Yeah, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on that. I think that technology is amazing, and it's going to be really a game changer in ergonomics. But we don't yet know what that data means or what's
Sure.
important with that data that relates to a safer working environment. But a lot of us researchers are working on that, and so I think we'll see big changes there in the future.
Okay, big picture question for you, because you've been at this for a long time, held in very high regard, generate a lot of peer-reviewed articles and publications and spoken. So is it possible to actually measure a positive safety culture, or is it more just organic in nature?
You have a lot of good questions, Mike.
Thank you.
I like that. I think that there are a lot of metrics that we can use
Okay.
to determine how positive that safety culture is. And again, I'm looking at it through the lens of ergonomics. But what I have seen in a lot of companies is they are laser focused on injury rates and incidences. And I understand that, or the cost of injury. Certainly, you have to keep the doors open and you have to be able to pay medical bills and that type of thing. But there are other metrics we can look at as well. I've done work in companies where their incident rates are very low, and you would think that means that there's not safety or ergo related incidents there. But in some of those cases, delving deeper, I found that the turnover rate was incredibly high. And so, the impact or the metric related to that culture of safety or that sense looking at injuries may not be the right place. Look at what is the cost of recruiting and training and hiring new employees. And so that may be where a negative safety culture is having an impact on the company.
Right. And the whole phrase of attrition, you said the interviewing process, the onboarding, and then you have to train them. So they're going to probably be hooked up with someone else in the organization. So they're going to take away from their regular job. Then they turn around and leave 2 or 3 months later, and you got to start all over again. And it just,
The research tends to indicate that to replace a worker costs about 20% of that individual salary.
Really?
And so when you think, when you think about how much that could be and what a drain that could be on the company, it's significant. And so I think having a positive safety culture is one of those ways that can lower the likelihood that people are going to leave a job after a period of time because of how they're treated, how safe they feel, and other aspects of the job.
It's fascinating. I live here in Vegas. I'm also a benefit charity auctioneer, like we talked about. And I've worked the majority of properties in the Las Vegas Strip, and one of them has an amazing steakhouse. Has been there forever. The bartender's name, I believe, is Steve. Has been there 27 years. The head server, she's been there about 21 years. And when I talked to him, I said, "Guys," I said, "well, why do you keep working here?" He said, "It's the way." We said, "We feel like we're part of the family. It's the way our boss treats us," and it's that simple, and at times, Gary, it can be that difficult as well to be able to establish that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and as through my career, I've had some opportunities where I could walk into an environment and say, "Wow, this is an environment that is very positive." You can sense that people like each other, get along, they support one another. And other cases where the tension's palpable as soon as you walk in and start talking to people, and so I think just being aware of that is the first step at improving those cultures when they aren't as positive as they need to be.
The phrase I stole a while back, I said, when you observe a positive culture, it's kind of like seeing really good art, right? When you see it and you say, and it's, it's almost palatable. People are excited to be there. You show up, and now you feel like your opinion's really valued, and they go, "Wow!" So as you're looking at this, if there's one thing leaders really need to keep an eye on how they conduct themselves to support that positive safety culture, what do you think that would be?
Well, I keep going back to that, but I think it's that positive relationship with the employees.
Okay.
Respecting them, listening to them, communicating with them, and I think it's especially critical in when we're dealing with ergonomics related issues, because, and I'll go back to the injury situation with cumulative trauma, is that individuals sometimes might report that that they feel an ache or a pain or something. And the first thing that's done is that they'll write down, what were you doing when that occurred? And sometimes what they were doing was not what caused the strain and the pain to begin with. And so that leads to suspicion that the employee is faking an injury, right, and can do a lot of ill will. And I think that managers can develop a more positive safety culture if they understand that a big bulk of injuries that they're trying to reduce or eliminate that are strain and sprain in nature, they have to understand how those occur, because the data might not be as accurate as it could be just because of the nature of how these injuries develop.
That is great insight. Well, we're getting towards the end of the show. At times fly by when I have amazing guests like yourself on the show, sir. So you had the opportunity to speak at a national conference. People were thrilled. They asked you to talk another 30 minutes. They're celebrating. Balloons are in there. They're throwing hats. They're hysterical. They're so gleeful with learning from you. So as you go to leave the stage, after saying thank you to everybody, of course, what's 2 or 3 things you really hope they write down and take back to their office to help their ergo programs?
Wow. I would like to think that is the reception I would get when I talk at a conference, but I've yet to had that level of reception. I will go back to some of the things I talked about. Number one is, the importance of having employees participate in this process, in developing a safer safety culture, a more effective safety culture, a more effective ergonomics process. They are the experts. They are the ones who have probably forgotten more about the job than you as a manager or an engineer probably will ever know. And that they may already have the answer or the solution to a safety or ergonomics related issue, but they may have never been asked. So talk with them, because any suggestions that they have might be the magic bullet that you're looking for. And if they believe that it's going to work, then the feasibility of it being successful, where I said earlier, so many initiatives fail.
Right.
It fails at that employee level. And if they're going to be on board because they're a part of the process and development of the solution, then it's much more likely to be a success.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Allread, thank you so much for being with us today. And how can viewers get a hold of you?
Ohio State's a big place, but when you type in or do a search on ergonomics at Ohio or ergonomics at Ohio State, you're going to come across our website. We are actually, our URL is spine.osu.edu, so it's pretty easy to find. And we have a lot of information on our website. We have information about various solutions to ergonomics concerns that we have developed. And so we have a lot of case studies and a lot of free information on our website that I hope people who come to that will find of value.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that concludes this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions. And people says, Mike, how can we get a hold of you? And I said, well, thank you for asking. You can find me on my website, www.scstrat.com. You can email me at mike@scstrat.com. You can also call my office, 702-780-1410. Until next time. And enjoy your safety culture journey. And don't forget to have the Ergo application there as well. It's truly going to make a difference for your people. Have a great week and be safe out there.